Bienvenido a Política entre Amigos. Estamos en esos tiempos que nos encanta a nosotros. Estamos esperando las elecciones final ahora para el Consejo Municipal y la alcaldía. Ya sabemos que en la alcaldía tenemos la candidata que está todavía en el boleto, Michelle Wu, y un voto de confianza siempre es bueno, pero esa elección ha terminado porque el contrario se ha retirado, que hace más importante la carrera del Consejo Municipal, que es la parte legislativa. En el distrito que tenemos, vamos a tener un representante nuevo, un City Councilor nuevo, es en el distrito 7. Y ahí hay una gran parte de esa población que es hispana y viven muchísimos latinos en esa área. Hoy tenemos uno de los candidatos finalistas, fue una elección interesantísima, aquí la cubrimos, y ahora tenemos dos candidatos para la final que se va a decidir en noviembre 4. So, asegúrese de votar, puede votar temprano, puede votar en ausencia. Y si usted va a estar fuera, asegúrese de que usted vote. Acuérdese, el voto suyo es la voz y la fuerza de nuestra comunidad. En esta serie, conozca a sus candidatos y aquí tenemos con nosotros un amigo, un activista y uno de los finalistas del Distrito 7, Minier Culpepper. Bienvenido, mi amigo.
Gracias.
How are you? Thank you for coming. I explained that in this district, we're going to have at least one new city councilor in the council, and how important it is. Although we are not having the mayoral election, the mayor is still on the ballot, and it's always good to, if you approve of good work, you give them that vote of confidence. You know, many of the other districts, we have incumbents that have won by large margins. And but here is a very tight race. So this is the race that everybody is keeping an eye on. So first of all, thank you for coming and and presenting yourself here. In our community, a lot of people know you already. You've been very active for years and years. And so tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, experience, and why did you decide to run for city council?
Thank you. Muy gracias. My name is Minyard Culpepper. I have lived in this district all of my life. I was born in this district. Have fought in this district for what is right and good and just. In fact, my grandfather, who built the Pleasant Hill Missionary Baptist Church right on Humboldt Avenue, walked, fought, and stood with Martin Luther King in the protests, went to jail with Martin Luther King. That's the kind of legacy I have. He built a church on Humboldt Avenue in Dorchester, 155 Humboldt Avenue, in 1941. He founded that church in 1939, but he finished building the church in 1939. My grandfather, my grandmother were the first black family to live on Seaver Street, the black family to own a home, first homeowner on Seaver Street. And they had to fight to buy that house. It's not as if Seaver Street, because it was pristine and it was sophisticated and it was high level, for a black family to live on Seaver Street back in those days was almost unheard of. My grandfather fought to buy that house, the house I live in today, that from years ago, I continue to, and here's what's amazing about living in that house, right across the street from Franklin Park. Right across the street from Franklin Park. My grandfather fought to buy the land that he built the church on Humboldt Avenue, fought to build that church in 1941. The church that my grandfather built, I've been there for 30 years. That's my legacy. My legacy has been to fight for Boston, in particular District 7. The church is in District 7. And what's interesting about my life is that I worked at the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development for 27 years. I was the regional counsel. And Juan said, why did I run? Why did I decide to run? I didn't decide to run on my own. In fact, I ran for the state senate in 2022. I lost that election. I said I would never run again. When this seat, it seemed like it was going to become open, I started getting phone calls. And when people called me and asked me to run for this seat, I told them no. I said, I'm not running again. They kept calling. They kept saying, we need you to run for this seat. I said, no, I'm not running again. It got to the point where I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to Los Angeles on a vacation. When I go to Los Angeles, I'm going to seek the Lord's will. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to pray. I'm going to seek the Lord's instructions on what I should do. I went to California. I stayed there for a week, praying and meditating, and I could hear from the Lord. I know people are saying, he heard from the Lord. Yes, I hear from the Lord. The Lord said, do it. Do it. I kept hearing, do it. So when I came back to Boston, I called the folks that were asking me to run, and I said, I'm doing it. I'm running for this District 7 council seat. That's the direction. That's the Lord's will. And let me just say this. In order to win this election, for me, it has to be the Lord's will. If it's not the Lord's will, I'm not going to win. If it's the Lord's will, I'll become the next city councilor for District 7. That's the way I live my life. What's the Lord's will for your life? And so when I look at what I've done in this district as regional counsel for the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, not only did we build much housing, but we did what I call neighborhood stabilization. Neighborhood stabilization is stabilizing neighborhoods by making sure that the people that live in that neighborhood, that they have an interest in that neighborhood. So some of the things we did, in fact, I have what we call, and I developed it myself because of the 27 years working for the United States Housing and Urban Development. I worked on Capitol Hill with a member of Congress. I was her chief of staff. She was the chair of the subcommittee on housing, Congresswoman Collins from Detroit. And so I have many years of housing experience. And some of the things that we did in terms of what I call stabilizing neighborhoods was we transferred ownership to Academy Homes. It's tenant owned. The tenant association owns Academy Homes. Canfield Estates in the South End, it was Canfield Gardens. We demolished it, built it back brand new, transferred ownership to the tenants at Canfield Estates. The tenants own that development. That's what I call neighborhood stabilization. And everyone's talking about gentrification. I have what is referred to, and I developed it, it's called a gentrification neutralization plan. Let me just say that one more time. Gentrification neutralization plan. And we're not going to do away with gentrification, but I believe we can neutralize it. I believe we can hold it right where it is now by home ownership. And what I developed under my plan was ways to own a home with existing resources. You don't need a new budget for home ownership. You can take existing resources that exist today to develop home ownership. When you own a home, it neutralizes gentrification, because gentrification takes place when many homes that are bought by folks outside move in, but if you own it, you've got no reason to sell it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about my gentrification neutralization plan. I'll talk about my 4 points to that plan. I'm also focusing on a priority of mine is economic development. When you look at District 7 and then you look downtown, you see a lot of cranes downtown, building all over downtown, the seaport. You see no cranes in District 7. We need cranes in District 7 because we know building is taking place. And so what I've talked about in terms of businesses and economic development in District 7 is we need what they refer to on Capitol Hill as an empowerment zone. The member of Congress that I worked for, they called her the mother of empowerment zones. And the reason why they called her the mother of empowerment zones, she called herself that too, is because she sponsored legislation to create empowerment zones. And what empowerment zones did for the city of Detroit, if you look at the city of Detroit today and look back 25 years, you'll see two different cities. The empowerment zone was an area that encompassed businesses that within that zone there's an intentional, there's an effort to invest in those businesses that are within that empowerment zone. I say we do that for Nubian Station and Grove Hall, create an empowerment zone, and invest in those businesses within that zone so that they can, like Detroit, when you look at Detroit today and those businesses, downtown Detroit has come back. We need Nubian Square and Grove Hall. If you think about Grove Hall, in fact, my grandfather had a shoe store in Grove Hall. When I was 14 years old, I was working in a shoe store. It was right across the street from Blair's Market. And I know Capizios. I know Capizios, who was woman's shoe, but I sold more Capizios through the business, my grandfather's shoe store in Grove Hall. And so when you think about business development, I want to focus on business development. The third thing that I think is a priority that we will do something about when I become the city councilor is mass and cast. Now, mass and cast is not necessarily in my district, but it abuts my district, and many of the folks that are in mass and cast that have the disease of addiction are moving over into District 7. It's right next door. But I think there are some solutions that everyone's talking about. And it's interesting, I've been talking about what they call a care campus for years. Well, folks are calling it a recovery campus, and the city council just voted to have a recovery campus, to establish one. There's been no discussion about where it would be, but the Long Island campus, that's what they called a recovery campus before the bridge fell apart and they had to bring all of those folks into Boston. It's what I refer to as a care campus, because I think we're in a humanitarian crisis, and I think we've got to do something about mass and cast. So that's my third priority. Housing. I'm a housing expert. I've made sure we have stabilized housing. When we talk about my neutralization plan, I'll talk to you about the 4 elements of my housing plan. And we can talk as much as you want about business and mass and cast. But I think for District 7, for me, District 7, and one of the exciting things about District 7 is walking down these streets and looking at the beautiful homes that are in District 7. District 7 is a jewel. And when you look at District 7, Roxbury, the South End, Fenway, Dorchester, it abuts major areas in the city. And in my opinion, District 7 is the heartbeat of the city. The way District 7 goes will determine the rest of the city, how the rest of the city goes. And so I'm glad to take some questions. Now look, I can talk some more. I can talk about the things I did during COVID. When COVID came, there were long lines of folks in line for food. At Pleasant Hill Missionary Baptist Church, where I've been for 30 years, we started a food pantry. To this day, we still give out 250 boxes of food every 2 weeks to everybody. When I can keep going.
I know. And those are some of the things that we want to touch on.
Okay.
We can go on and on.
We can go.
We're so active in so many ways, and I think that's a great introduction. That you've been active and you've got plans on how to deal. You said housing, which clearly is a #1 issue, and economic development and massive. So let's do a couple of follow-ups on that. On housing, absolutely. Ownership is the key. Absolutely. Because that is wealth that stays in the community. People take pride and so on. But we also have the folks that rent or some of the other intentionally saved housing, you know, subsidized, to make sure that we have affordable rents for folks too. And I know, you know, your position on that, making sure that we stabilize affordability for tenants, and especially our seniors and so on. So whatever ideas you have on that. And then on the economic development, clearly we need all that, the building, which you stress, which is, and then, and you mentioned the small businesses too. The part that we'd like for you to address is how do you make sure that there's inclusive in all of that economic development, like when they have all those cranes and all those workers, how do we make sure that we have women and folks from the neighborhoods also participating in the construction and so on, and how do we make sure that our businesses that have been here through, you know, the rough times, that they also stay competitive and are able to survive. So any ideas that you have on how do we make sure that we protect those small businesses? And then on mass and cast, there's so many issues, you know, because it's a regional issue, you know, so there's a lot of stuff, and people keep coming, but it's a public safety issue, public health, and there's so much around that. So touch a little bit about some of those other things. In housing, clearly, the home ownership is the key thing, and I'm glad you're concentrating on that. So what about, you know, rental?
Right.
And
so, one great question. Because part of my gentrification neutralization plan encompasses renters also. Let's take public housing. We saw several months ago the press conference with the governor, the mayor, the congressmen, the state senators, the local elected officials, all at the McCormick Housing Development. The McCormick Housing Development is in South Boston, and we looked at what they planned for that. So McCormick now has 1,200 public housing units. They're now going to add 1,000 market rate units to that 1,200. That's going to be 2,400 units. One of the changes, and I don't think folks have paid much attention, one of the changes is from the Boston Housing Authority owning it to Wynn Development owning it. Now Wynn owns it. It's in the hands of a private developer. And what bothers me, what scares me, is that when you have a private developer, their goal is to increase, to make money. Let's just put it out there for what it is. And so when you have the 1,200 Section 8 apartments, those are term Section 8s. That means at some point, those Section 8 certificates are going to end. Now, the private developer can either renew them, or he can do what they call opt-out. Opt-out means that he no longer wants a Section 8 in that development. He can make that decision. If they opt out, and as regional counsel at HUD, I litigated a case, we were in court, 27 years, the same case. When I left HUD in 22, we were still litigating the same case in court that had to do with private developers opting out of Section 8 contracts. And so I know these owners will at some point want to opt out when the Section 8 ends. This is what I say, and this has to do with knowing how Section 8 works, knowing how public housing works. HUD has what you call a declaration of trust. Sometimes it's referred to as a deed of trust on those federal developments like McCormick. I say wherever the Public Housing Authority transfers a public housing development to a private developer, then we should take that declaration of trust, transfer it to the tenant association. That gives the tenant association some ownership as renters. They still have some ownership, just like Academy, just like Canfield Estates, but they have some ownership interest. So when that owner makes a decision, he has to go to the tenant association, who also has some ownership interest, because he just can't opt out without the tenant association agreeing to it. I think that's the way you balance the private developer with the tenants that have been there for many years. And that gives the tenant some say in the direction and how that public housing moves forward. That's one way of, again, stabilizing neighborhoods. Another way of stabilizing neighborhoods, and many folks don't know this, is that whenever you sign, when you bought your house, you looked at that closing checklist. On that checklist was what they called a HUD-1. A HUD-1 is what banks require because it's HUD mortgage insurance. So you have mortgage insurance on your home. Those of you at home that own a home, look at your closing checklist. You'll see a HUD-1. And you may not have understood what that HUD-1 at the time was because the amount you pay is minuscule. But if you default on that house, the first thing the bank is going to do is notify HUD. HUD will pay off that mortgage for that default. They'll bring that home into their inventory. So it will be part of HUD's inventory. HUD then takes those single-family homes and they push them back out to the different cities where that single-family home was foreclosed on. The cities have what they call a first right of refusal. So Boston has a first right of refusal for every house that comes from HUD's inventory into the state. Boston has a right of first refusal. I've never seen a home that Boston has refused. If you ever go on HUD's website, you'll never see a single-family home on HUD's single-family home website within Boston. You'll see them all around the state, where cities have decided not to take that house into their inventory. Boston takes every home into the inventory. And what that home does, it becomes part of the Boston lottery. So when you enter Boston's housing lottery, you're also entering a lottery that consists of HUD homes. Those HUD homes that come into the Boston inventory, I say that we put a moratorium on them for Section 8 residents, create a lottery for Section 8 residents only, where Section 8 residents who live in the district can become part of the lottery for that HUD house that has come into the Boston development. Again, it keeps that District 7 resident in District 7 as a homeowner. Neighborhood stabilization. There's one more piece, I got a few more minutes.
Sure.
There's another piece to it that has to do with low and moderate income housing. That's what they call multifamily housing. Many multifamily housing in Boston that are what they call project-based Section 8. Project-based Section 8 is a development that was built based on Section 8. And what happens is, and what we're afraid of, is that Congress is going to tinker with Section 8. We know that Section 8 recipients now pay 30% of their rent, no more than 30%. We anticipate that that's going to increase. The challenge for many Section 8 recipients in Boston when their percentage increases is that their wages aren't increasing. Everything's increasing except wages. Cost of living is increasing, food's increasing, just going to the cleaners. Everything is, even having your clothes clean is increasing. Everything's increasing except wages. So when you look at a Section 8 recipient, you look at an increase in what they have to contribute to their rent. Many of them are going to be housing challenged. One of the things that I uncovered when I was getting signatures to get on the ballot, one of the signers said to me, well, why can't we invest in low and moderate housing? Well, you can. And here's how I say you can do it. Many folks invest in what they call REITs. A REIT is a real estate investment trust. Real estate investment trust invests in $1 million developments. The investors get their investment back based on how much they invested in that development. I say we have REITs, real estate investment trusts, for low and moderate income housing. The investor may not get as large a return as he would on the $1 million property, but he'll get a return. You take that investment and we use that to subsidize the increase that those Section 8 recipients have received as a result of it going from 30 to 35 or 40%.
Okay. So Minier, as you see, there sometimes the federal law and departments and all change, and it seems like you want to make sure that expiring use, especially when taxpayers' monies are used to develop and subsidize,
absolutely,
then they don't come a time 20, 30 years as it has happened in so many places, and then the area has moved up, and now the owners decide that they no longer want to participate. So I see that the idea that you have is to make sure we protect that and it stays within the public.
Absolutely.
So that would also apply to other things. And also, real quick, are you for a rent control?
Absolutely. In fact, I just signed a rent control referendum that they're going to have for 2026. That will cap rents at 5%.
Okay.
Look, I'd rather cap them at 3%, but I'll take 5%. You got to start somewhere, because I remember years ago they had rent control. Again, neighborhood stabilization, because the renter can anticipate for that year how much they're going to have to pay for rent. They can anticipate how to budget it. And so I think rent control keeps rent at a certain level that's affordable.
And the other issue, and housing is such a broad issue, there's so many things. Making sure seniors can afford to stay in the home, and making sure they get.
I've got a plan for that too.
I'm sure you do. We will definitely have you back to talk more in depth about all these issues. But on the economic development, we talked about making sure that the folks from the city participate in the development and the working phase and so on, and also that we protect our small businesses, make sure they invest. And we see now that a lot of people are shopping from home and so on. So maybe touch briefly on that. And then the other thing is, in your team and your working team and all the organizations that you form and so on, do you believe in having a diverse staff and inclusive? Do you believe that is something important?
Absolutely. In fact, well, let me take that first, and then I'll talk about economic development. Because one of the things that we found, especially in the federal government, we found that a diverse team or diverse coalition has always been more successful than a monolithic team or organization, because of the diversity of ideas. When you have diversity of ideas, you have the richness coming from different directions, different cultures, different educations, different thoughts, and it put together becomes such a creative. If you look at some of the creativity that comes out of diversity, you'll never have that when you only have the same thinking people. When people think the same way, they're going to continue to have the same results. When you have a diverse group of thinkers, you come up with the most, not just the most efficient result, but you come up with the most creative results. You come up with the most broad results that are able to meet the needs of many more people. And so when you think about diversity, when I was at HUD, I had one of the most diverse attorney pools in the country. I hired diversity because I believe diversity is the key to success.
Good.
I really do.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
My campaign staff is a diverse campaign staff. Now let me talk a little bit about economic development, because I talked about the empowerment zone, and you talked about small businesses. When you look at the empowerment zone concept, all the businesses within that zone are the businesses that are focused on with an intentional way. So when you create an empowerment zone, you assess every business is in there. The small mom and pop businesses that might need a new stove, the small mom and pop businesses that might need an updated cash register, the small mom and pop businesses that might need a new stove. And so you look at the needs of those businesses within the empowerment zone, and I say we take the empowerment zone from Nubian Square to Grove Hall. As a city councilor, make intentional investments within that empowerment zone so that those businesses can grow and succeed.
Okay, clearly you have in-depth ideas on the top issues now, and we had an empowerment zone in the area, a lot of development, so we want to make sure that we keep an eye on it, and that whatever happens benefits everyone. So we have a very interesting election coming up. And it's going to be decided by November 4th. We'll have a new city councilor, and here many are Culpeper. So tell us, why should the voters of District 7 send you to be their city councilor in the Boston City Council?
Love that question. Minyard Culpepper is a candidate that has the experience and the knowledge on day one. On day one, I'll go to City Hall. As the Chief of Staff of a Congresswoman, not only did I read and interpret legislation, but I wrote legislation. I understand legislation. Not only will I be able to go to City Council on day one as your legislature, but when you look at my story, look at my life, look at my experience, it was Minyard Culpepper when COVID came that stepped out to said, we need to make sure everyone has food on the table. When it came to the vaccines and when it came to COVID, it was Reverend Minyard Culpepper that got a group of ministers, a diverse group of ministers together that were the first ones to take the vaccine shot to encourage folks that vaccines are safe for you. When it came to violence, it was Reverend Minyard Culpepper in the middle of the street, in the middle of the violence, that created the Trotter Park Peace Program that was an employment program for those that were involved in violence that are now working. It was Minyard Culpepper that started that program. When it came to Haiti, and when the Haitians were sleeping at the airport and they wanted to house them at Molina Cast, and community members stood up and said, no, we can't have them at Molina Cast, it was Minyard Culpepper that stood up next to the governor and welcomed those Haitians from the airport to Molina Cast and said, this is the kind of community that Melnia Cast would have. She would welcome those Haitians into Melnia Cast. The thing about Melnia Cast, the center is on Martin Luther King Boulevard. Martin Luther King would welcome those Haitians into the Melnia Cast for a place to stay. It was Minyard Culpepper, again, that stood up and welcomed them into Melnia Cast. When it came to the Walgreens and when it came to becoming a pharmacy desert, who was it that led the protest that stood up and told Walgreens in Illinois that you can't shut down on Martin Luther King's birthday? It was Minyard Culpepper that stood up to fight to make sure Walgreens didn't shut down when they wanted to. It's Minyard Culpepper that will go to the city council and that will fight for you. I have fought for this district all of my life. I'm fighting for this district right now, and I will fight for this district as your District 7 City Council.
Muchas gracias, Minyard. Definitivamente tiene experiencia, tiene la energía. You got all the energy, and definitely you know the issues. And I know any working groups if you are successful, you will always be welcome here to present and to continue to expand. And it seems like your way of doing business is being inclusive and consulting with the community and so on. And we will always hope you come to share your ideas, your legislative initiatives, and so on. So thank you.
Let me just say this to the residents of District 7. I want to hear from you. I want to take your ideas to the City Council and bring your ideas into reality. I want to hear from you, not just when I get to the City Council. I want to hear from you now. So Minyard Culpepper for City Council, look at my website. You'll say culpepperforcouncil.com. Email me or even call me. I'll give you my personal cell number, 617-835-2608. Give Minyard Culpepper a call. Tell me what you need, and I'll go to City Council and work on it for you.
Good. And in the pages of Política Entre Amigos, you will find the information also and the phone number. Well, again, my friend,
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Vamos a regresar con su programa Política Entre Amigos. Ok, estamos aquí en la serie Conozca a sus candidatos. Tenemos la elección ahora para el Consejo Municipal y hemos tenido todos los candidatos finalistas. Marvin Matelier quedó en las finales, él entró en el 7º lugar y sabemos que eso puede cambiar y es una persona que ha sido un líder muy activo y estamos muy complacidos de tenerlo aquí para que se presente. We're very happy to have you here, Marvin. We are dedicated to the active participation in our democratic process. That's how we love the country. That's how we make sure that the right changes are made. So,
absolutely.
First of all, congratulations for throwing your hat in the ring and,
thank you so much.
Running for office. Tell us about yourself, your background, history, experience, and also why did you decide to run for the City Council?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Marvin Matelier, and I'm running for Boston City Council at large. So a little bit about myself. I am a small business owner. My wife and I, we own a cafe called Ula Cafe. I've been serving the United States Marine Corps for 16 years. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the reserves. I have 3 kids, 2 of them are in Boston public schools, and I'm also an executive director of Haitian Culture Center, the Tucson Louverture Culture Center, and I've done a lot of work with veterans throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I say all of this because I've never worked in City Hall, never been an elected official, never been an appointee, but I have international, national, state, and community level experience and soft skills as well. And I think that those are the things that I could bring to City Hall when it comes to being able to provide a bit of diplomacy and making sure that we're focusing on the biggest mission, which is to our people, the Bostonians, if you will, when it comes to it as well. So that's a little bit about me. Don't hold it against me. I was born and bred in New York, but I've been living in Boston, which I chose to be my home for close to 10 years, and I'm not going anywhere because this is my home, this is my people, and I plan to be here for a very, very long time serving as your city council at large.
Okay, Marvin, so there's so many issues now, you know, of importance, but the 3 top issues that you would address,
yeah.
You know, and tell us a little bit about what are they. I will then do some follow-ups, yeah. But and a little bit of why you picked those 3.
Absolutely. So the 3 top issues I really want to address, housing affordability being one. You probably hear this from a lot of city councilor candidates. Boston Public Schools being another one. And then looking at public safety being a 3rd. And I'll put a bonus in here. You probably heard it from a lot of city councilors, but we are dealing with a lot of issues that's happening at the federal level that's impacting us at the municipal level. So I want to make sure that as a city councilor, I am doing everything within my resources and influence to combat a lot of the issues that we see at the federal level impacting us here at the Boston level. You
know, in housing, there are 2 main things that first, affordable to purchase, and make sure that you build wealth for generations, and the other is affordability for working class in the rental market. Some ideas on that and what programs you favor or any initiatives that you might offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that when we're looking at housing, especially when we're looking at affordability housing, I am for expanding more housing. Building more housing is important. If you look at the economics, supply and demand is important, right? If we have more supply, then that'll go ahead and decrease the prices of the stock that we have. I think it's important. We need to be able to do that. I will caveat it and say this with an asterisk. We need to make sure that we are talking to the different neighborhoods, right? And understanding where's the best place that we could integrate these housings. I've been knocking on doors all over the city of Boston, from Charlestown all the way down to Reedville, to South Boston to JP. And some of the things that I hear is that they feel that there's a lack of community process. So looking at things such as the Article 80 process, where there should be more of a community input, but ensure that the community input is there when it comes to development is very important. And finding ways such as creating remote hybrid programs, understanding that not everyone could go to these meetings because we typically get the same usual suspects that's going to these type of meetings. We need to make sure we have a well-diverse group of people that are voicing their opinions and voicing their concerns and coming up with common ground solutions to build more affordable housing. I think with more affordable housing, that'll help us go ahead and look at decreasing the prices that we have to deal with and make it more affordable to be here. I am for rent control, rent stabilization. That is something that's near and dear to my heart. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I grew up in a rent control apartment. And if it wasn't for rent control, I don't know where my family would be, right? They came from Haiti, they didn't have a lot of money, but with that rent control, that gave us a sense of stability, financially, physically and mentally. We need to bring that here. There are a lot of people who want to stay here and live here, but corporate landlords are taking advantage of these tenants, where it positions them in a position to either leave or they have to stay but pay more, which means that they're taking money from other resources that's near and dear to their heart.
You know, and on the home ownership too, there's some programs that is trying to assist,
yeah.
And there were even federal, but that's gone away now. But locally, that they have MAHA, different organizations,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what do you think about that? And do you favor making sure that we have those classes and assistance with the down payments and so on?
Absolutely. We need to have that. And you brought up MAHA, I agree with that. We need to be able to someone asked me the other day, how do we go ahead and create generational wealth, especially for people within our community, the Black and brown community? They feel like they cannot, there are no ways for them to create this generational wealth. One way to do that is by affording a home, making purchasing a home fairly easy as much as we can, with all these different mechanisms that we have in our disposal. So I am for looking at different programs where we could have people purchase a home and they could be able to leverage and use that for generational wealth for themselves, as well as for their family. If they want to go ahead and sell that home down the line, that's something that they could be able to use and leverage. I'm also for expanding deeper affordability in a lot of these units. We got to be mindful, if we're having units that's coming on up with different IDP requirements, let's make sure that we have units that is deeply affordable for people to actually go on and purchase or be able to rent. And I think that's something that we need to go ahead and continue to focus on.
Good. And you mentioned housing definitely is such a broad area, and we hope you're able to come back in the future. I'm glad that education. Yeah. Definitely, education is the key to all doors and the great equalizers and so on. We have a very our public schools have been doing well in many standards. There's a lot of things that could change. Also the vocational education, and also we have the best universities and places of higher learning. So a lot of those realities that we have here, how do we make sure that our children are able to get the education they need, especially in all of the new industries that are coming, nanotechnology and the robotics and artificial intelligence? You have any thoughts on that? Yeah,
absolutely. Look, I think I might be the only candidate, dare if I say, within the city council at large. So keep me posted here. That's a parent of Boston Public School students. I might be a little bit off, but as a city council at large. So I have two of my girls. They're in Boston Public School. One is in 3rd grade, and the other one's in 1st grade. BPS is something that's near and dear to my heart. So making sure that we are providing programs that's going to be meaningful for our the investment of our city, which is our students and our children, is needed. I think some of the things I want to take a look at, you brought up AI, robotics, and things of that sort. What happened to all of our vocational programs? Right. What happened to all of our trade programs? I think that's something that's really important, and we need to get back to the basics on that. Got it, Roger. Massachusetts is considered #1 when it comes to education. We are doing better when it comes to Boston Public School System. Again, I love the school that my kids are in, but I feel like we're still not hitting the mark when it comes to a lot of programs that we've had in the past and we've pushed away. We have to be mindful as well that college is not for everyone, and that's okay. right? Not everyone wants to go to college, but there are other options and other avenues that people could go ahead and take, and they could be able to make a great living off of. I am a product of going to college. I went to a military college. I got a master's degree. I have debt, right? And I've met people who are in the trade who limited debt, but they're making six figures and they're doing extremely well. We need to go back to the basics, look at different options for our children, for our youth, and I think looking at vocational programs, look at trade school is a great way to go about it. And just to add on to that, AI is taking over a lot of these different industries, right? I used to be a management consultant where I worked for Accenture and Slalom, and a lot of the work I did during that time, AI is starting to take over a lot of that, right? It's going to be hard for AI to take over a lot of the trade programs that we have, the plumbing, the what have you, all that stuff. It's going to be hard for them to do that. And now we have a aging trades profession, but we don't have a lot of people being able to come in and replace that. So that's one thing I want to take a look at, making sure we're injecting back a lot of these vocational programs. I think that's important for us to do. Another thing is ensuring that we have great facilities for our students, right? The school that my kids go to, we love it, but we also see that the facility needs work. And we understand that the experience for our children, it's part of the infrastructure is part of the experience of our children. And if we are having substandard facilities for our students and even for our teachers who are the initial touch point for our children, then that's an issue, and we're always going to have concerns about how they continue to develop. And I want to say this last thing. I want to make sure that we're tightening our Boston Public Schools with higher education. I know that there are some programs that we have, Roxbury Community College, Northeastern, and so on and so forth, but I think there's so much more that we can do when it comes to tightening the type of relationship and type of programs that we can see between higher ed and Boston Public Schools. So those are some of the things I want to be able to focus on to make happen as a city council at large.
Yeah, it's clear we have in our state, in our city, some of the highly respected universities and so on. There's no doubt about it. And that there is a program, pilot, payment in lieu of taxes that they have to contribute and so on, probably. And they've done a lot of great things, and but it needs attention. Right. And you mentioned the trade schools. No matter how, the laboratories, any facilities where they're doing research, medical research or whatever, they always need power, so electricians and the plumbers and so on. So we got to make sure that we're covered there, and make sure that, like I said, our children are trained so they can be able to take these jobs and that they're given that opportunity, and make sure that they're also able to have all the new tools that you need as we're going to school now and online and so on, to make sure they have access on that. So if you are...
Can I say one last thing about that?
Yes, please.
So actually two things. I think another thing we need to look at, making sure that we're coming up with programs where our children could start building their resume at a young age. I've been asked by parents, hey, between the ages of 13, 14, 15, it's really hard to find things for our children where they could be able to, do a job, things of that nature. I know that we have summer programs, summer youth programs. Why can't we do them more year round, where I could be able to have someone at my cafe, Ula Cafe, which I own, come on in, and they could be able to learn a little bit about the business. They could learn soft skills such as being able to communicate, working dynamic, find mentors, find their passion, see if that's something they want to do, and then start from the get-go. At 13, 14, 15, they're building their resume, something that they could be able to use as they get older. Again, I'm the founding executive director of a Haitian Culture Center. Being able to take those youths and come on in and work in the Culture Center, right? Not just summer long, but year long. Obviously, we want them to continue to focus on their homeworks and their assignments, but man, what a way for us to start at a tender age, building those soft skills for our students. That's going to be able to build a lot of resiliency and professionalism at a young age, and something I want to be able to explore.
The other issue you mentioned in public safety, and there are so many different ramifications. And we're in an area here where we have the issues with addiction, the mass incarceration and so on. And also you need safe places for the children to play, the quality of life issues, you know, and public safety is such a broad issue also.
Yeah.
And we also have what you said, you come from immigrant parents. Clearly, that's what Boston and America is all about.
Exactly.
The contributions of the Irish and the Polish and everyone that has come here. And you can clearly see in every city the contributions that hard-working immigrants,
yep.
which is the vast majority, have made throughout history.
Yep.
But now we're going through some difficult times.
Very difficult.
And some people are afraid, you know, workers and people that have come here to make sure their families get the opportunity
yeah.
at the American dream.
Right.
And that deals also with public safety. The fact that, you know, here you're able to communicate with the departments and make sure, because any of these criminal elements, the people they harm, nobody wants to protect that. You know, we're all against that, but we're talking about hard-working people that clearly make a difference every day.
Yep.
And you see that, like I said, all over. What are some ideas that you have on that to make sure that everybody feels safe and heard, and also that they are able to continue to work and contribute?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I get into the solution piece, you know, what you just said with me resonates right there. Again, I'm a son of Haitian immigrants. I have family who are here off of TPS, right, temporary protected status, where they're here. And now that might get revoked, and they might be going back to a country that's dealing with a lot of, you know, violence. To me, that's a human rights issue. That's a human rights issue. Who knows if that person that goes back home to Haiti in its current situation will make it within a week or two. And that's not fair and that's not right. And I guarantee it, those people are here, they're working their butts off. Now, another thing, I live in Eggleston Square. And Eggleston Square is a heavily, you know, Latino community. Dominican Republic, neighbors live in that area. There's a lot of businesses that's in that area. And there's been a couple times that we've had ICE presence there. You know what happens? Those businesses don't open, you know, in the morning, and that causes economic disruption, right? And that's happening all over the city of Boston. You could go to Mattapan, you could go to all these different areas, and it's not fair and it's not right. Within my own business, I have immigrants that work there. You know, God forbid something happens to them or happens to any of those businesses. What is it going to do to our economic engine here in Boston? And I think, you know, there are people that understand it, but I think there are a lot of people that don't understand that as well, and that needs to change. Something I'm for, and I want to continue to fight, and I know the City Council is working on that, continue to focus on the Boston Trust Act. I think that's important. We need to go ahead and continue to focus on that, continue to strengthen that, make sure that we're eliminating the interaction between the Boston Police Department as well as the ICE agent. That is truly important when it comes to that. I also want to make sure that we have a legal defense fund. All right, we have people who get detained by ICE, and they may not have the money or the support, the financial support to get them out of the situation that they have, and they're being wrongfully detained, right? Making sure that we have money set aside to go ahead and support and help them out. I'm a big fan of the Know Your Rights policy, you know, making sure that, actually, I think I have some on me right now, right? I have these Know Your Rights cards.
Excellent.
You know what I mean? So I have these Know Your Rights cards, and I want to make sure that people have these in different languages, so they understand if something needs to present themselves, they know exactly how to go ahead and conduct themselves along with their allies. And there's a lot of amazing organizations and agencies within Boston that's addressing and combating the presence of these federal officers that's here, such as, you know, the Immigration Family Service Institute. We got a handful of others that are doing work. So as a city council at large, I want to find those agencies, leverage their support, and making sure that we're protecting our immigrant community as much as we can. That's really important for me.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned the TPS protected individuals that now, for decades, some have been protected. And, you know, when you hear these claims, which are lies, I'm going to use the opportunity to make sure that people are aware of the facts. These folks have been vetted more than anybody. All the TPS, they have to, every so often, They have to show that they're not getting any benefits, that they have no criminal history, and they pay a fee. So it means, and then their children have come and studied, and we've invested, and they're making tremendous contributions. The same with the DACA children that were brought here, and now we have some in Ivy League and making all kinds of contributions. So this is inhumane, but it's an actual lie. And they say, oh, they are getting these free services and so on. No, they are not eligible for any of that. That is a spin, it's an invention. And when you see all these people working very hard, and in the time of the essential workers, the folks cleaning up and doing the construction and so on, along with all other hardworking Americans, these people are highly represented. So it's not about being vetted and secured because they go through that. You're aware, right?
I'm definitely aware of that, right? So, and you know, for some of the TPS, you know, you also have to be a sponsor.
Exactly.
Right. So I had to be a sponsor for some family members for them to get here. So I'm very aware of that, and I totally understand the procedure on that. Can I just say one last thing on the immigrant piece? Another reason why I'm running is because of the negative rhetoric that I've heard, especially for the immigrant community, but specifically for the Haitian immigrant community, where this candidate now in the White House, he was saying some really horrible things about the Haitian community in Springfield, Ohio. Oh, really? And I remember, and I study policy. I have my master's of public administration, and I understand international relations. One of the things I want to do is ensure that there's a pipeline from the local level all the way up to the federal level on policies that are impacting many of these countries, right, including Haiti, so that we could be able on the ground saying, hey, no, we will not let this happen, or at least we can have a voice on these policies that's having adverse reaction to a lot of these countries, such as Haiti. So we could be able to help with the economic development in those countries, because a lot of people don't want to leave their home. You understand that? Absolutely. There are a lot of people don't understand that. People are like, oh, they just want to come here. There are a lot of people that don't want to leave their home. They just don't have a choice, right? That's right. So what are ways that we could be able at the city level, at the state level, and at the federal level, making sure we have a voice in those policies that's making those negative impacts? That's the reason why.
Yeah, that's the whole show. Absolutely. People come here because they want the American dream, and sometimes they're running away from very violent situations, and clearly there are a lot of corrupt governments in different places that cause that on different sides, and so these folks that come here and are working hard is because they want a better future for their children, and believe me, like they have to be vetted, and they are not getting all these benefits and all of these fake stories, about even, the mistreating animals and so on.
Yeah, exactly.
This is how you create a non-existing monster so you can divide people.
Exactly.
So any opportunity we get, the facts are the facts.
Yep.
So these are your neighbors, people, and I'm glad that we touched on that. But since we are into the election, we're electing people to the council. You're in the final 8.
I am.
And they're going to be sending the 4 top vote getters. Why should the voters of Boston pick you as one of their city councilors at large?
Absolutely. So, like I said before, I've been serving in different capacity. I've never served in the city of Boston. I was never an employee or appointee, but I have different levels of government skills. I'm the only one that probably served at the international level. I've worked in U.S. embassies in Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. I know how to negotiate. I know how to build relationship within the means of diplomacy. I could use those skills in City Hall when, at the end of the day, we may have issues, right? Collaborating with our colleagues, I could use my skills to build and find common ground and focus on our mission, which is to you all, the Bostonians that live here in Boston. I've also served as a Deputy Chief Engagement Officer for the Veterans of Massachusetts, where my #1 role was constituent services. I spoke to a lot of people in Boston saying when they call City Hall, they call their city council, it takes days or probably don't hear anything at all. My #1 rule as a Deputy Chief Engagement Officer for Veteran Services is that we have to return their call within 24 hours and exhaust all of our assets to help them out. If we can't figure it out, we will find a way to do so. That's the way I want to be able to approach this. And then the last thing, me working at the community level, I have the ears on the ground with my cafe at Ula Cafe and me being the founding executive director, right? So I want to make sure that at the end of the day, I continue to have my ears on the ground what the community wants, but as a city councilor, I'll continue to do that. So there'll be 3 ways for me to be able to support you all. So November 4th is a general election. I am number 4. Please vote for me.
Marvin, thank you. And there's so many other issues, but I want to, you said you serve the country as so many Latinos, and that's what it's all about. Pluribus unum. And our country stands for liberty and justice for all. God bless America, the country that we love and serve. And let's make sure we continue to live to that and follow the rule of law and continue to get better every day. So I appreciate and thank you for your service.
Thank you so much, sir.
And it's good because we'll have another veteran there.
Absolutely.
The men and women that serve our country are always protected.
Absolutely.
Pues, muchas gracias por su atención. Recuerde de votar. Vote temprano. There will be early voting opportunities. We'll have all the information on where you can do that. And make sure you vote. November 4th is the magic day. And good luck, my friend. Muchas gracias. Nos vemos la próxima semana en su programa Política entre Amigos.